والله من قرأ سورة الفاتحة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين سيدنا الممجد بشير المصدق المصطفى الأمجد محمود الأحمد أبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين ولعنة الله على الظالمين من الأولين والآخرين. أما بعد، قالوا أبا عبد الله الحسين صلوات الله وسلامه عليه: إني لم أخرج أشرا ولا بطلا ولا مفسدا ولا ظالما، وإنما خرجت لطلب الإصلاح في أمة جدي محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. أريد أن آمر بالمعروف وأنهى عن المنكر وأسير بسيرة جدي محمد وأسير بعلي بن أبي طالب صلوات الله. Awaited Savior of humanity, Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, my respected teachers, elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بمصابنا أبي عبد الله الحسين صلوات الله وسلامه عليه. Our discussions regarding the prophetic model of Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam have allowed us last night to arrive at the discussion of the prophetic personality. So far, amongst the salient points of what we have said is that the Holy Prophet of Islam came with a trajectory of growth. He took his community from point A to point B. He found his community in a certain way and realized that he had to bring them before the pedestal, the completion of their own humanity. And in doing so, in order to make that change throughout the community of Arabia and beyond, he needed to be a person who primarily appealed to every group, every facet, every demographic of that community. So if you were from the slave community, the black community, the women, the aristocrats, any tribe, any faith, Rasulullah had to be a person whereby he appealed to all of them. They would also appeal to him. And as such, Rasulullah was a person which brought people together. The third thing that we highlighted from this is that Rasulullah appreciated every group, every faith, and in doing so, brought them together. The way in which he treated the Christians, the way in which he treated the Jews, even the way in which he treated the hypocrites of his own community. From here we see many lessons. Yesterday we posed the question, how did Rasulullah accomplish this great feat of changing a community from one that was swimming in immorality to a community whereby Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would praise members of that community by saying, كُنْتُمْ خَيْرًا أُمَّةً أُخْرِجَتْ لِلنَّاسِ, that you are the best of people amongst the whole of humanity. How does an individual accomplish this? We said that this comes through the person's personality, that he is someone that people look forward to meeting, a person that does not send people away from him. And in the discussion, we highlighted first and foremost that the prophetic personality is one that no matter which person you are, he does not send you away. We highlighted this from the personality of Prophet Nuh alayhi salam, whereby he says to his community, "Ana ma biṭarid alladhina amanu." I do not send away anyone who believes, whether or not they are poor or rich, beautiful or ugly, white or yellow or black or red. I don't judge people this way. As long as they come with faith, as long as they are people who are God conscious, as long as they are people who are wanting goodness, I bring them towards me, I do not send them away. And now from here, we discussed yesterday, we were going to divide the personality of a person who does not send someone away, rather a personality that draws people towards them. We divided this into three categories. This personality is divided into three. The first type, or the first facet of a godly prophetic personality is the person who is able to speak to people at their own level. He appreciates the world from their reality. The second is a person who takes people from their point of weakness to a point of strength. And the third would be a person who makes a long-lasting impact on a person. Whether he is present or otherwise physically matters not. What he has done has left the fragrance of his movement within the heart of that person. Now, we're going to go back now, and we're going to unpack this discussion in a slightly different way. We're going to pick it up and reassess this discussion from a slightly different angle and move towards the latter facets of the three aspects of a prophetic personality. We said that the personality is someone who doesn't send people away. He is someone who draws people towards him. And in light of this, the person is someone who understands a person or a group of people from their perspective. We took some time to try to understand this yesterday. We highlighted first and foremost that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says within the Holy Quran, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا مِن رَسُولٍ إِلَّا بِلِسَانِ قَوْمِهِ. We do not send a messenger except that he speaks in the language of people. Not just language literally Farsi or Aramaic or English or Arabic. Rather, he speaks to them at their level. He speaks to them within their own culture. He speaks to them within their own framework of thinking. This is the way in which a prophet speaks to his or her own people. In light of that, we expanded and highlighted how Prophet Nuh alayhi salam, when he spoke to his people, he addressed them in their own way. That these were people who were primarily arid-based, agricultural-based, farming-based communities. And so when he spoke to them about the reward, he did not just speak to them about the reward of akhirah, he spoke to them about the reward of dunya as well. Now here, we want to unpack this a little further. And if you recall in our first night, and as we recapped our first night, the second and third night, we said why we are speaking about this particular topic. Why are we trying to understand the prophetic model? Why are we trying to understand the prophetic personality? Why are we trying to understand the prophetic mode of leadership? The reality is, as we stated in the previous nights, each one of our A'immah, salamullahi alayhim ajma'een, are exponents of the prophetic model. Meaning that each of our 12 blessed Imams, salamullahi alayhim ajma'een, expound upon the methodology of the Holy Prophet of Islam. They are reenacting that, reproducing it, expressing it in accordance with their time and with their circumstance. Meaning that the principles that are set down by the Holy Prophet of Islam are universalized and accentuated into a given circumstance. We mentioned a famous narration from our sixth Imam, Ja'far al-Sadiq where he says, Al-Mahdi yasna'u kama san'a Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Al-Mahdi acts just as Rasulullah has acted. Now, here what this means is that the principles of the way in which Rasulullah acted each of the Imams, and our Imam will enact. We sent us away with a homework. We questioned something. And if you remember, in the first few nights we posed a question. Imagine if the Holy Prophet of Islam came today and began his prophetic leadership today, the end of October 2014. Think about the world the way it is today. Think about if he was to come to a particular community. If, for example, he was to come to Dubai, or he was to start his prophetic mission in New York, or he was to start it in Manchester in the United Kingdom, how would Rasulullah commence that particular mission of his? How would he commence this? Which groups would he have to attend to? Which mindsets would he have to deal with? Which challenges would there be? Which strengths and weaknesses? Now indeed, certain strengths and weaknesses, certain mindsets might be very similar between that and the Arabian community of 1400 years ago. We might say that there are certain things that they have in common. For example, broadly speaking, we might say that they are people who drink alcohol, that they gamble, that they don't have God at the forefront of their mind, that they have certain things. We might say that they also have certain strengths about this community today. That they're very charitable people, they're very generous people, very intelligent, intellectual people, people who have created a society with rigid laws and a system for every facet of their communities. But we would also appreciate that the community today in the 21st century has its own stresses. It is a very different community, a globalized community, a community with different technological advancements, a community that may have a different social structure, a community, the way in which they deal with each other is going to be very different. And so I pose this question: if Rasulullah was going to come today, how would he commence his mission? Where would he begin it? How would he engage a community as diverse, as unique as it is today in the 21st century? Why did I pose this question? For what reason are we discussing Rasulullah and his methodology, his model, his thought process, his personality, his distinguishing features? If we want to understand that question of how Rasulullah would do things in his own time, the answers are the same as to how Mahdi Salamullahi alayhi will do it when he returns, inshallah, this Friday, and if not, the next Friday. Each Imam is nothing more than the expounder of the prophetic wisdom. And so when the awaited Savior of humanity comes, we just have to switch the question. Instead of asking you, think about how Rasulullah will do things, it will be the same question: how will Mahdi Salamullahi alayhi do things? It will be the same principles. But Mahdi Salamullahi alayhi will have to do it in accordance with the world that he sees, in accordance with the challenges of his era, the pins, the things that he will have to deal with for his own given time. Now, think about this further. It's very interesting when you analyze, when you ponder over this matter. Rasulullah came to a community primarily geographically confined and limited. Would that be a fair comment? He's primarily, his mission is universal, but he as the individual comes 1400 years ago to primarily an Arabian community. They are of one broad culture. They are of one broad language. They are various tribes. There are various subcultures. There are various religions. The difference between Rasulullah and every one of our preceding Imams and our 12th Imam, Salamullahi alayhi, is one and one only. That is that all of our preceding Imams from our last prophet up until the 11th Imam primarily are geographically confined to their own context. Rasulullah was confined to his context. The preceding 11 Imams were confined to their context. They expounded upon the prophetic wisdom in accordance with that geographical boundary. The 12th Imam is the one and only Imam who will not be geographically bound to the Middle East or to the Arabian Peninsula. The Holy Quran says, وَأَشْرَقَتِ الْأَرْضُ بِنُورِ رَبِّهَا. The entire earth will glisten with the nur of its Lord, meaning the awaited Saviour's coming and his establishment. He will govern Venezuela. He will govern New Zealand. He will govern Nigeria. He will govern South Africa. He will govern Japan. He will govern North Korea. He will govern Sweden. He will govern Alaska. Think about this very closely. If a prophet has to speak at the level of a given community in accordance with their circumstance, their mindset, their agriculture, their economy, their political system, their culture at large. If you are a prophet that comes to one community of the Arabian Peninsula, you have to deal by and large with one community. When you are Mahdi salamullahi alayhi, you have to deal with the entire geography of the whole world. You have to deal with the culture of Venezuela. You have to deal with the culture of New Zealand. You have to deal with the culture of Sweden. This man must represent the entirety of the world, be able to speak the language of the entirety of the world in all facets of that community and bring them towards goodness, the same way Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam brought them towards goodness. What a feat this man has on his hands. Rasulullah said, after 23 years, مَا أُوذِيَ نَبِيَّ مِثْلَ مَا أُوذِيتَ. There has not been a prophet who has had to deal with the strains, the trials, the difficulties that I have had to deal with. And he came to a community, by and large, of 100,000 believers. How many people were there at Ghadir that heard, مَنْ كُنْتُ مَوْلَاهُ فَهَذَا عَلِيٌّ مَوْلَاهُ? 100,000. Mahdi salamullahi alayhi has to deal with 7.2 billion people if he was to come this Friday. Now here, that mode of personality is one in which that as a leader, Rasulullah has to appeal to all of those demographics. And all of them have to come towards him. You see, a leader, any leadership, any movement has to be able to represent everybody at their own given needs. Yes? So take, for example, the president of this community. I'm just giving you an example. Yes? Theoretically, the president of any community, the leader of any community, must be able to represent you at all of your levels. He must appreciate your need and your need and your need. In this small community, as an example, we have Pakistani, we have Iraqi, we have Irani, we have Lebanese, we have Khoja, and so on and so on. We have Afghani. The leadership must be able to represent everybody. But also, he must get everybody to buy into him. It's a difficult task, isn't it? Anyone who knows leadership, it's a difficult task. Rasulullah had to do that, by and large, for 100,000 people. And break those boundaries, break that division, and bring people together from their tribalism in towards unity, from their hatred in towards love. The Imam of our time emulates the Prophet in his principles, but does it with 7.2 billion people. How does a human being do that? How does a human being represent 7.2 billion people and get the world to move along with him the way in which he wants to move them? Rasulullah brought them from here to here in a trajectory of growth. Mahdi salamullahi alayhi must bring the world from here to here in a trajectory of growth. He has to represent every demographic. Mahdi salamullahi alayhi has to represent every demographic. He has to speak to people at their own level of thinking. Mahdi salamullahi alayhi has to do that in the same way. Now here we begin to understand what we mean by the prophetic model. It's very sad to think that you have a group of people in Syria and in Iraq thinking that they can establish an Islamic state. They can establish a khilafat. Do you think that you represent 7.2 billion people? How do you think the real caliph of the world needs to be? How he draws people from every spectrum of the corner of this earth towards you? How must you be in order to represent that prophetic model? This is what we are speaking about, the reality of this religion, the reality of the prophetic personality. Think about this thing, ponder tonight. How does this individual, when he returns, accomplish this particular feat? And so, that prophetic personality, the first thing is, he is a person who speaks to everyone at their own level. Today, the world has its own challenges. Help me unpack this a little bit further. If you were to go to Afghanistan today, specifically as that country, what would be the challenges of that country? If you go towards India or Pakistan, we're talking about in the region, they are very close to each other, aren't we? We're talking about a border to another border. Yet how vast and different that community is. And then you go towards South America, and you see how vast and different that community is. Our problem is we don't even think about these things. When we think about Mahdi salamullahi alayhi, we confine him to the Middle East. And I think now that there is an army, and now I think the Sufyani army is rising, I will confine my thought process towards X, Y, and Z. No, he is a global figure. He represents humanity at large. He is not an imam for the Shia. He is not an imam for the Muslim. He is not an imam for the monotheist. Mahdi salamullahi alayhi is an imam for all 7.2 billion people of this world. At this point, we begin to understand what we mean by the prophetic personality. When you and I talk about molding ourselves in accordance with that prophetic personality, when we talk about how we need to be with people, how we need to understand their reality, how I need to understand where I am, my experiences, my thought, and then see it from another person's in order to bridge that gap, this is what we are talking about in this pluralized world. Because that is the world that is outside us. Go to any mall and just pause and see the variety of human being that is in front of you. The beauty of the difference of every individual. My problem is that I want to make everyone like me. I want to make everyone think like me, act like me, speak like me, read like me. I haven't understood the first facet of existence, that everything is individual and that is the way God made it. And so my responsibility is, when I speak to you about religion, when I want to pull you in towards goodness of Islam, goodness of Ahl al-Tashayyu', goodness of the madhab, the madrasa of al-Muhammad, I need to understand you at your given context. And through understanding your strengths and weaknesses will I be able to accomplish that feat. Not make you a copy of me. You will never become a copy of me, and I will never become a copy of you. Why are we trying to make it such a case? One of the most beautiful, probably the most beautiful story of any scholar I have ever heard of understood this better than I've ever seen any non-ma'soom or any of the non-great members of Ahlul Bayt perform this great feat of appreciating the weakness of another person and bringing them forward in regard to their own given context. This story is narrated by a scholar by the name of Sheikh Nu'mani. Sheikh Nu'mani was one of the closest students or closest companions of His Eminence Ayatollah Shaheed Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr, rahmatullahi alayhi. I don't think I need to introduce Shaheed Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr too much because of his phenomenal achievements. However, in case there is anyone who doesn't know Shaheed Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr, let me just give you one story to introduce the personality that he is, and then give you this story that is narrated by Sheikh Nu'mani. There's a story that says, one day His Eminence Ayatollah Sayyid Abul Qasim al-Khoi, rahmatullahi alayhi, he was ill and he went to hospital. And as you know, in hospital you have your hospital room, and you have your bed, and you have a table next to you, and so on and so forth. Sayyid al-Khoi, rahmatullahi alayhi, was lying on his bed, and he had taken off his scholarly uniform, his amama and his aba, and he had placed it on the table next to him. Someone had come and told him that now Sayyid al-Sadr, Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr, rahmatullahi alayhi, is coming to visit you. Of course, there is an akhlaq to visit someone who is ill. You may go visit them at hospital, you may go visit them at their home, but there is great blessings in visiting someone, keeping someone company when they have become ill. So Sayyid al-Sadr is coming to visit Sayyid al-Khoi in the hospital after his illness. Sayyid al-Khoi is lying on the bed, he's informed Sayyid al-Sadr is coming. Sayyid al-Khoi gets up from his bed in his state of weakness, his state of ill. He gets up from his bed, he walks towards the table and begins to put on his aba, his amama, his jubba, and he begins to dress himself in his scholarly garments. As he's getting up and putting on his clothes, Sayyid al-Sadr enters into the room. He comes to him, Sayyidina, please, don't trouble yourself, please, sit on the bed, no need to put on your cloth and your garments and dress formally. He said, no. The fact that you are coming to visit me is the equivalent of the entire of Najaf coming to visit me. This is Shaheed Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr. Now listen to this story. Why would we have such reverence for this individual? What was it about this man's heart that he had accomplished, his discipline, his understanding of a given person's position, a given person's reality? Listen to this story and think about these things when we mold our personality, when we begin to grow through these majalis, when we begin to say, whom do I want to become and which way do I want to be with people? Narration says, Sheikh Nu'mani narrates, Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr was arrested. He was arrested many times. He was arrested and he was under house arrest. And he says that as he is under house arrest, Saddam had kept a group of guards surrounding his house so that by and large no one could enter into the house, and of course he couldn't exit the house. Only, certain close aides or helpers or people bringing things were able to come to the house. Sheikh Nu'mani says that the house was broken in such a way that the roof was broken. There were even bullet holes inside the walls because of shots that had been fired into the house. Sheikh Nu'mani says that one day I was in the house and I saw an event which was so strange, so powerful. He says Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr had gone to the door and he was looking through a hole in the door. Maybe this was a bullet hole, maybe this was something broken. He says I was looking through the hole, and Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr, as he was looking through that hole, he recited the kalimat istirja. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Shaykh Nu'mani asks him, Sayyidina, why did you just recite this? Why did you recite Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un? Sayyid Sadr responds and says, I'm looking outside and I'm seeing surrounded outside the house are the guards. And I saw one of them wipe his brow in sweat. He was fatigued, exhausted. Of course, the sun of Iraq is beatingly hot. And anyone who is going to be in the army is going to have his uniform. It's going to be very heavy. He's going to have his gun with him. He's going to have his pack with him. And so I saw him in a state of fatigue, weakness. And so out of pity, Shaheed Sadr says, out of pity for that man who was guarding the house, I said, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Shaykh Nu'mani responds, Sayyidina, how can you recite Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un out of pity, out of empathy for that individual? Listen to the words of Shaykh Nu'mani. Don't you know that your house is dilapidated, that when the heat of the sun comes, there is no blocking. When it rains, there is no way to stop the rain from coming into your house. This is Shaykh Nu'mani's words. Your children go without the basics of amenities, and yet you recite empathy for these individuals? SubhanAllah. The response from Shaykh Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr. He says, woe be upon you, Shaykh Nu'mani. These words are unbefitting to come from someone like you. Meaning, if you are a scholar, if you are someone who is representative of the faith of Ahlul Bayt, more is expected from you than this kind of thinking. Don't think like this. What do you mean? Why are you saying this? He says, you haven't understood their situation. You don't know as to whether they think that we really are the enemies and they are doing good. You haven't realized as to whether they have had the education that we have had the education. You don't know as to whether they are so poor, this is the only job that they can get, and so they are doing what they have to do. Think about things from their situation. Understand it from their situation before you criticize and before you condemn them. Subhanallah. What an individual that has understood people from their own given perspective. He says to Shaykh Nu'mani, take this jug of water and go and quench their thirst. This man has understood Hussain ibn Ali to a level that maybe I will never understand Hussain ibn Ali. These are our enemies. These are the people that keep my children from having the basics of amenities. Give to them water. Shaykh Nu'mani exits the house. He gives to them water. He returns back. He says, Sayyid Sadr, the captain of those guards has a message for you. What is the message? He says, O Sayyid Sadr, continue to do what you are doing. By God, Saddam is shaking in his boots from you. Now just think about this, what is being said. The way in which Sayyid Sadr treated those people, the way in which he understood those individuals, the way in which he looked at it from their paradigm, from their perspective, from their weakness, through that akhlaq, through that appreciation for their worldview, he was able to get truth from them and bring them closer towards him. What do you think they thought of Shaheed Sadr after that day? How do you think they understood him and his mission, and they understood Saddam and his mission after that day? Our problem is that we haven't understood this prophetic personality. We haven't yet imbibed this prophetic personality into ourselves. When we speak to Hindu, when we speak to Sikh, when we speak to Sunni, when we speak to Sufi, when we speak to other Shia from other schools, All I want to do is send them away from me as opposed to bringing them towards me. I haven't understood the first thing about the way in which the religion of Islam is. وَمَا أَنَا بِطَارِدِ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. I do not send away anyone who believes. I bring people towards me. And that is the way of appreciating people in the way in which they are. If this is the way of Rasulullah, this is the way of Mahdi salamullahi alayhi, this is the way of our Maraji', how can I be anything other than this? It's time to review. How was I when I met someone of a different sect? How was I when I met someone of a different faith? How was I when I met someone of a different perspective of religion? And the more you begin to review that, the more I begin to review that, the more I will see how close I am towards the prophetic personality, whether I'm distant from the prophetic personality, and what I have to do to bring myself closer towards that. This is the first facet of the prophetic personality. Think about this in light of the Imam of our time, how he will deal with 7.2 billion people in this world. The next facet is to appreciate it from the perspective of bringing growth to an individual. Not only do I look at it from their perspective, the next thing a prophet or an imam does is change them into being better people. Yesterday, we spoke about this from the story of the man who was still an alcoholic. If you recall yesterday, we gave the story, the man comes towards Rasulullah and says, I still drink. He says, if you cannot give up alcohol for me, what will you give up? Lying. And so when seated with his companions in Masjid Nabawi, he had to admit, or he would have been forced to admit to his own companions, I'm a drinker of alcohol. Through that embarrassment, he managed to change, and now he stopped drinking alcohol in order to do that. I might be a person, when someone comes to me and says, I have a weakness, I will send them away. No. Rasulullah is someone who is approachable. This man had confidence that I can go to my Prophet and I can admit to him my weakness, and he will find a way of bringing me from my weakness into my strength. This is what a Prophet does. Now, let us see more about these examples from the way in which the Prophet was with people, and the way in which he dealt with people, and the way I need to deal with people as well. Another story from the life of Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. A beautiful story, very powerful, again on this same sort of concept about the alcohol. A person says, Na'udhu billah ya Rasulullah, I want to perform zina. Quran says, do not come close towards zina. Do not approach it even in one step. And so this man came to him and said to him, I want to perform zina. How might I be if someone came to me and said that? How might I rebuke them? How might I send them away from me? Rasulullah walked with him, said, come, let us talk. Let me ask you a question. If now you wanted to do zina, whom would you do it with? He said, I would do it with such and such a woman. I would do it with a woman. He said, okay. Now, let us change this scenario. Imagine now that woman was your sister, or that woman was your mother. Would you want that illicit, illegitimate action to be done with your sister or with your mother? He said, of course not, Ya Rasulullah. I would want their piety to remain, their dignity and their honor to remain. Rasulullah said, if that's the case, why would you do it with someone else? That person is someone else's mother, is someone else's sister, is someone else's daughter. Why would you do it in that case? Think about it from that perspective. The man was shocked at this response. Ya Rasulullah, I never thought about it from this perspective. Let me realize now that this is wrong. You see, again, dealing with a person in their own context, in their own weakness, changing them in the way in which they dealt with people. Another wonderful story from the life of Rasulullah Mohammad sallallahu alayhi wa Rasulullah was sitting with his companions, and a person came to him. Someone who was very fond, loved Rasulullah, came to him with a gift. This gift was a fruit. And so the man came, it was a Bedouin man, he came, he gave this fruit. Assalamu alaikum ya Rasulullah, wa alaikum salam. He gave to him this fruit. He sat down with Rasulullah. Rasulullah opened this fruit and ate it, ate the whole fruit and finished the fruit in front of the man. Thank you so much for the gift that you have given me. May Allah bless you. The man was pleased, stood up and walked away. The companions sat there bewildered, baffled. Ya Rasulullah, this is very strange. You're a person of great generosity. You're a person who would never have something on your own. In fact, there is the narration to say that Rasulullah would never eat on his own. That if he had food, he would wait for someone to come, or he would invite someone to go and eat with him. Ya Rasulullah, you are someone who would never just eat on your own. What were you doing? This is not like you. You would normally share this fruit with us. Why would you not give us part of that fruit today? Rasulullah responded by saying, this fruit was a very bitter fruit. It didn't taste so beautiful. It wasn't the tastiest of fruits. I know that if I had given you that fruit, you would have made a face, or you would have complained about the purity, the taste of this fruit, hurting this man's feelings. Because he came and gave me something from his heart. And so if he knew that it didn't taste so nice, he would have been hurt that he didn't give me the finest of the fruits. But I wouldn't want that man to have been hurt. And so I knew that if I had sliced the fruit, given you the fruit, you would have made the face and that man would have felt bad. And so I had the whole of the fruit in order to protect that man's feelings. Do you see the way Rasulullah is? This is taqwa. Taqwa, one explanation of taqwa is to be able to see everything that is around you and to be able to understand God consciousness from all the different facets of your circumstance. Rasulullah had this ability to appreciate and get the best out of people. I would never do something that sends you away hurt in the way in which you are. This is the beauty of this man. Now again, ponder upon this in light of the Imam of our time. Ponder upon it in light of how the Imam must be with 7.2 billion people. The way he will be with individuals, the way he will be with cultures, the way he will be with cultures, the way he will be with countries, the way he will be with entire continents. It really makes you appreciate the value, the reality of the Imam of our time and the way he would be in order to get the best out of people. This is how we need to be at work. This is how we need to be at school. This is how we need to be in the university. This is how we need to be with our family and our friends' circles. You see, people came towards Rasulullah. People loved Rasulullah. They wanted to give to him. They wanted to be spending time with him. And as such, our own personality must be exactly the same way. Think about those stories about how Rasulullah was with people to get the best out of people. When I sit with someone in the car, am I someone who switches on the music and sends people away from the remembrance of God? Or am I the person who switches on something to help them in the remembrance of God? When I'm with someone, what is the conversation that I am having with someone? Am I having a conversation that will turn them away from the dhikr of God or bring them towards the dhikr of God? You see, here straight away we begin to understand that personality that is magnetic, that is God-centric, that gravitates, that pulls people towards you. And that is the way in which we want our personalities to be, with every community, every type of person that we are with. The third facet of a personality is someone who leaves their fragrance with you. Firstly, you understand things from their world. The second, you take them from spiritual weakness to spiritual strength. And the third is that when you depart from them physically, when you're no longer with them, you have left that scent of fragrance in their heart. How often do we have people that come into our lives? They only spend a short amount of time, but for the rest of my life I will remember them. What is it about that person? That he emanates that wisdom, that God consciousness, that humor, that personality that brings you towards him. What is that famous narration from the commander of the faithful, Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullah wa sallallahu alayhi? Be a person that either people long for your company or they mourn you in death. Be a person like that, that you've left an impact upon those people around you, that they long for your company, that you've made blessing and help to them. A wonderful narration from Rasulullah Mohammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, where he says, أَفْضَلُ النَّاسِ أَنْفَعَ النَّاسِ لِلنَّاسِ. The best of people are those people who give benefit to people and to people. You're a benefit to people. The best of people are those people who just give benefit to others. They have a way about them that when they leave, they are better off than when they were. Think about this. Think about people in your own lives that you have met, that they have that charisma, that quality of haiba with them, and that when you depart from them, you feel a revolutionized person. That you know every time you spend time with them, you have taken away something from them. They have planted a seed, and it is down to you to water that seed. What was it? How much time and effort they spent on their own soul, developing themselves so that they radiated that nur. What was it about those characters? This was something that Rasulullah had with him. That even where people were no longer with him, they longed for that character. He made a difference in those people. A story says, Uwais al-Qarani. Have we heard of Uwais al-Qarani? A story says he is the man that broke his teeth after the event of Uhud. Whether one wants to believe that narration or not, it is down to you. However, he is the one who is attributed to that story. Uwais al-Qarani has a famous daraja. Hum darajatin inda rabbihim. There are stations with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is a famous daraja with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as being a companion, a sahib of Rasulullah, having never met him. Why? Because of his love for Rasulullah. The famous story tells us that when he first went to Medina, his mother had told him, I am very ill. I only allow you to go to Medina for 3 days. Irrespective of how much you long for Rasulullah, irrespective of how much time you spend with him, after 3 days you must return. And so Rasulullah was in the battlefield of Uhud. Having returned back to the city of Medina, Uwais had already departed and left. He responded by saying, I smell the fragrance of Uwais al-Qarani having come from Yemen. Now, long after the death of Rasulullah, one hadith says to us, one riwayah says to us that Uwais al-Qarani's mother, may Allah bless her, passed away from this world. And so Uwais, of course, where would he go? He would leave Yemen and go to Medina in order to see Rasulullah, to perform his ziyarah. He rushes towards Medina. He arrives in the city of Medina, and as he does, he goes straight towards the masjid in order to meet with Rasulullah. He finds out Rasulullah has passed away from this world and he has missed him. What happens? He sits down and he sees a group of the companions sitting just beside him. And so what does he do? He begins to just sit and listen to their conversation, their companions, and want to hear what beauties come from them about my Prophet that I haven't heard yet. So he's sitting just listening to the dialogue taking place between these companions. What does he hear? The companions are narrating an incident that they were privileged to have partaken in. What does he hear? The companions are saying to themselves, do you remember one day Rasulullah sat with us and he asked us a question? What was the question? The question was, if you had one thing, if you could have one wish in this world, my companions, what would it be? What a question. We often get that question, don't we? We often have that question. If you could have one thing, what would it be? What would it be? People will say, world peace. Yes? A Lamborghini. Yes? Some of us will want the Lamborghini more than the world peace. We all have our answer, right? The companions responded in their own way. One companion said, I long for martyrdom. Very noble, correct? I long for martyrdom with Rasulullah. Another person responded by saying, I long to have Jannah. Another responded by saying, I long to be able to go with Rasulullah to another community and change them towards Islam. All very noble things. Uwais al-Qarni is sitting, listening to this dialogue of how each companion is narrating what they said in response to this question. If you have one wish, what would it be? Uwais al-Qarni begins to cry and cry and cry. They turn towards this person, this stranger. Who is this man crying? The companions asked. He said, I am Uwais al-Qarni. They said, you are Uwais al-Qarni? You are that companion that Rasulullah used to speak about, having never met Rasulullah? Please come sit with us. How great you are in the eyes of Rasulullah. Why were you crying so profusely at this moment? He says, I was listening to your dialogue, telling each other about what you would have given as your response to the one wish when Rasulullah asked you, what is the one thing you would want? How could you say such things? How could you say such poor responses? Uwais, what do you mean? We asked for martyrdom inda Rasulullah. We asked for heaven. We asked for helping people become Muslim with Rasulullah. What would you have asked for, O Uwais? What would you have wanted from that one wish? Uwais responded by saying, I, Uwais al-Qarni, longed to meet Rasulullah, but I never got the opportunity to do so. I can't express to you how much pain there is in my heart, having never had that opportunity to sit and bask in the glory of Rasulullah. If I had one wish, my one wish to God would be to give every human being the opportunity to bask in the presence of Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. That's all I would have wanted. I never got that. You don't realize how lucky you are. You see, Rasulullah was someone who had such an impact on people. He didn't even need to be physically present in their lives to make such a change. Think about that in light of the Imam of our time. We haven't seen the Imam of our time. Maybe you have. We haven't seen the Imam of our time. Has he made that impact, that fragrance spreading through our hearts? Now, the beauty of that narration is that Rasulullah himself, in a famous tradition, was sitting with his companions and he begins to cry. Ya Rasulullah, why are you crying? He says, how I long for my brothers. Rasulullah, aren't we your brothers? We partake with you in war. We partake with you in building the masjid. Aren't we your brothers? No, you are my companions. My brothers are the ones who believe in me, having never seen me. These are my brothers. How I long for them. Question is, do we long for him? Now here, the point is that the personalities which will leave a lasting impact in people. Even if I'm with someone or I'm not with someone, we make a difference to their lives. We change the way they are. We change the way they feel. That we change the way they think. We don't have to be people who bring people towards Ahl Tashayyu per se. As in, we are not going to convert everybody. Did Rasulullah convert everybody? Did Ali ibn Abi Talib convert everybody? Salamullahi alayhima? No. Do you think you and I are going to convert everybody? No. But we are able to just bring them to a better state of their own living. Maybe there are people who drink alcohol. Maybe we can help guide them, reduce, remove from their lives. Maybe there are people who watch immoral things. Maybe we can help them remove those things from their lives. Maybe there are people with foul-mouthed tongues. Small victories can help change a person. Only God knows how He will take another person to the fore of their own completion by virtue of the minimal that we help plant within their lives. In the same way, Rasulullah did this for 100,000 people. He brought people from every facet of life, Bedouins, intellectuals, Christians, hypocrites, and the way in which he dealt with them. His personality was one that they were struck by the way that man was. On the 10th of Muharram, there is no individual who was more struck by the prophetic personality than Hurr ibn Yazid al-Riyahi. How this man changed from being a person who, had it not been for his tawbah, by God he would have been in the annals of history confined to the ashtrays and the accursed tombs and the pitfalls of hell. This man, someone who was so noble, as Hurr enters into the battlefield, he recites a line of poetry. He says, I am Hurr, known to come from a house of generosity. There is no house, there is no household known for its generosity in Medina or Mecca more than Banu Hashim. You see, he had been struck by Banu Hashim. He had realized whom he was. He had realized who Aba Abdullah was, and through that had made that migration towards Hussain ibn Ali. It is narrated that Hurr has 1,000 troops underneath him. He was known as amongst the commanders of the armies. And so amongst the 30,000 troops, he had his own wing, his own battalion that would enter into that battlefield. He had been given responsibility by Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad to bring Hussain ibn Ali back towards Kufa. Hussain enters in towards the areas of Taf, and as he does, he sees Hurr and that army. Hurr, what choices do you give to us? He says, I am commanded to bring you back towards Kufa. He says, I will not go back towards Kufa. Either you let me go towards Mecca or to another land that I will go towards. He says, no, I do not allow you to leave. He grabs the reins of the horse of Hussain ibn Ali. Hussain turns to him and says, O Hurr, may your mother weep for you. Hussain ibn Ali says this. Hurr responds by saying, had your mother been any other I would have responded by telling you the same. But your mother is Fatima al-Zahra. How could I say this about Sayyidati Nisa'il Alameen? How could I say this about the daughter of Rasulullah? How could I say this about the wife of Amir al-Mu'mineen? How could I say this about the mother of Hasanain, Sayyiday Shababi Ahl al-Jannah? Your mother is Fatima. How could I say this about your mother? And so it is said on that afternoon, Hussain ibn Ali descends from his horse in order to lead the prayer. He turns towards Hur. Hur says, "Oh Hussain, pray and we will all follow behind you." Imam Hussain alayhi salam prays and leads those enemies, the same ones tomorrow that will be hurling their spears, hurling stones and rocks, hurling their arrows and their unsheathed swords towards Hussain and his family. They are praying behind Hussain ibn Ali today. And so on that evening, Hur is listening to the buzzing, Hur is listening to the dua and the Quran being recited from the tents of Hussain ibn Ali. On that day of Ashura, he stands in front and he turns towards the commander. He turns towards the commander of the armies and he says to him, "Oh Ibn Sa'ad, is it true? Will you really attack Hussain? Will you really attack Hussain ibn Ali, Sayyiday Shababi Ahl al-Jannah?" He turns to him and says, "Oh Hur, indeed heads will be severed, blood will be shed. By God we will attack Hussain and leave none alive." At this point, Hur responds by saying, at this moment, he begins to tremble, he begins to shake, his body begins to tremble. It comes to him, one of the men comes to him from his own tribe and says to him, "Oh Hur, if anyone from Kufa was to ask me, whom is the bravest from amongst you? Surely I would respond by saying, Hur, he is the bravest from amongst us. Now I see you quivering and shaking. Are you afraid to enter into the battlefield?" Hur responds with his famous line. He says, "Inni ara." He says, "It is if that I see myself between Jannah and Nar. It is if that I see myself between heaven and hell, the fires of this hell engulfing me. By God, I do not wish to go towards hellfire. I only long towards the heavens." It is said by some of our khutaba at this point that Hur takes himself and blindfolds himself, binds himself and tells to his son and tells to his slave, "Take me towards Aba Abdullah al-Hussain." Think about this, brothers and sisters, when you and I perform ziyarah of Hussain ibn Ali, how we take ourselves towards Hussain, our master. How must Hur have taken himself towards his master Hussain at that moment? It is said that he crawls towards Hussain ibn Ali. He comes towards him. Hussain is in his tents. He says towards his family members, "Oh Abbas, oh Akbar, oh Muslim, go outside because there is a guest coming towards us." If you have gone on ziyarah, you will know that when you go towards Hussain ibn Ali, now he treats you as a guest. He tells his companions and his families, "Go and welcome my guests. Go and welcome those who have come from afar to come towards me." Hur comes towards him. One narration says that he comes on his horse. He rides towards Hussain ibn Ali. He is gathered and he comes into the tent of his Imam. He comes and he says to his Imam, "Ya Aba Abdullah, halli min tawbah. Has my repentance been accepted? Is there any way that my repentance can be accepted for the damage that I have done towards you?" Hussain Hussein responds by saying, Tallahi, by Allah, your forgiveness has been given. At this moment, it is said that he falls from the horse. He clings to the feet of Hussein ibn Ali. Oh my Imam, I was the first. I was the one who brought this upon you. I am the reason as to why your children are calling out al-Atash, al-Atash. I am the reason as to why there is so much thirst in the throat of Asghar. I am the reason as to why Ruqayya runs towards Abbas. Please forgive me. Allow me to be the one who enters first in towards the battlefield. It is said at this moment he realizes what he has done, and he goes and he crawls towards the tent of the women. He says, O women of Ahlul Bayt, O women of the household of Rasulullah, please forgive me for what I have done to you. I beg you not to curse me and not to send me towards Fatima al-Zahra in this way. Please do not complain to me of my mistress Fatima. I beg forgiveness of you. At this moment the ladies come out and begin to console him. He comes out and he rushes in towards the battlefield. He says towards the enemies, do you not know which people you have made thirsty? Do you not know which people you are on the verge of attacking? Do you not know which people that now you will be trying to kill? At this moment it is said that they fire arrows back towards him. He returns back towards the Imam awaiting his instruction. He comes towards his son and he comes towards his slave. Hara says towards them, we were the ones who inflicted this tragedy of no water. We are the ones who made this family come here. Let us be the first to enter in towards the battlefield. And so they come towards their Imam. They say, O Aba Abdullah, we seek permission from you to enter in towards the battlefield. He says, O Har, go in towards the battlefield. Har enters. It is said that he strikes and kills 40 of the enemies, but eventually they surround him and they begin to attack his horse. As they attack his horse, the horse becomes lame. He falls from the horse and begins to fire at them and strike at them. They surround Hur and take out their swords. They attack the commander of theirs and they begin to strike him with their swords. Eventually Hur falls towards the burning plains of Karbala. At this moment he calls out to his master, Alaykum minni salam, accept my salutation. At this moment they come out. Imam Hussain rushes out towards Hur. He sits down beside him and he begins to place his head in his lap. Imagine a few minutes ago Hur was the one who was stopping Hussein. Now Hur's head is in the lap of Hussein. How much Hussein had made an impact upon Hur's life. He places his head upon his lap and he says to him, O Hur, let me wipe that blood from you. Hussein takes a handkerchief and places this upon the broken forehead of Hur, covering him. And then he turns to him and says, O Hur, indeed your mother named you Hur. Your mother named you free, and indeed you depart from this world free. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the reappearance of the awaited Saviour, to allow us to be alongside Him at all times in our life and in our death. If we are to pass away from this world before His coming, to raise us from our graves so that when we partake in the victory of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. Ya Allah, there are many people around the world going through such desperate times. Those people who are in a state of war and oppression, homelessness, poverty, lack of education, disease and natural disaster. Ya Allah, grant them all safety, security and victory for the sake of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. Ya Allah, allow us to perform the ziyarah of Hussein ibn Ali this year and every year inshaAllah, and become martyrs in the cause of Hussein ibn Ali. وَقَتَلًا فِي سَبِيلِكَ فَوَفِّقْ لَنَا مَاتِمَ Hussein, Ya Hussein. 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 Ya Hussein.
دیکھو نہ ادھر بابا دیکھو نہ ادھر بابا سینے میں سنا ہے دل توڑ کے رکھ دے گا وہ درد گراں ہے سینے میں سنا ہے سینے میں سنا ہے دیکھو نہ ادھر بابا سینے میں سنا ہے سینے میں سنا ہے دیکھو نہ ادھر بابا سینے میں سنا ہے سینے میں سنا ہے ٹوٹے ہوئے نیزے نے ڈھائی ہے جب آفت ٹوٹے ہوئے نیزے نے ڈھائی ہے جب آفت وہ درد کی شدت ہے ایک پل کو نہیں راحت اس درد کی شدت تو اس درد کی شدت تو چہرے پہ آیا ہے سینے میں سنا ہے سینے میں سنا ہے دیکھو نہ ادھر بابا سینے میں سنا ہے سینے میں سنا ہے بیٹے کی جدائی کو مشکل ہے بہت سہنا بیٹے کی جدائی کو مشکل ہے بہت سہنا جو بیت گئی مجھ پر ماں سے نہیں کہنا صابر ہے بہت لیکن صابر ہے بہت لیکن ہاں پھر بھی وہ ماں ہے سینے میں سنا ہے سینے میں سنا ہے دیکھو نہ ادھر بابا سینے میں سنا ہے سینے میں سنا ہے سرور نے کہا بیٹا کیا حال ہے بتلاؤ سرور نے کہا بیٹا کیا حال ہے بتلاؤ ٹوٹی ہے کہاں برچی اس باپ کو دکھلاؤ اکبر نے کہا بابا اکبر نے کہا بابا یہ ہاتھ جہاں ہے سینے میں سنا ہے سینے میں سنا ہے دیکھو نہ ادھر بابا سینے میں سنا